You're terminated, Dr. Amara Wilson. Surrender your credentials and vacate the premises immediately. Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Lawrence Blackwood's voice boomed across the bustling emergency department of Westlake Memorial Hospital, causing nurses to freeze mid-stride and patients to stare. His tall figure loomed over Dr. Wilson, his silver hair and tailored suit projecting authority as security guards flanked him on either side. Dr. Amara Wilson, 36, stood perfectly still, her white coat immaculate despite the 16-hour shift she'd just completed. Her dark eyes, usually warm and compassionate, now reflected a controlled fury as she stared back at her superior. 10 years of exemplary service as the hospital's top trauma surgeon, countless lives saved, and 3 prestigious medical awards, all seemingly meaningless in this moment of public humiliation. "On what grounds?" she asked, her voice steady despite the audience of shocked colleagues and curious patients. "Gross violation of hospital protocol, unauthorized treatment of an unidentified patient, misappropriation of medical resources, insubordination." Blackwood practically spat the words, his face flushed with what appeared to be theatrical indignation. "People like you need to understand there's a proper order to things in this institution." People like you. The words hung in the air, their implication unmistakable to everyone present. Dr. Amara Wilson had graduated top of her class at Johns Hopkins, completed her residency at Mayo Clinic, and turned down lucrative offers from private practices to work at Westlake Memorial, a hospital serving one of Seattle's most diverse neighborhoods. The daughter of Ghanaian immigrants, her father a taxi driver, her mother a home health aide, Amara had defied every statistic and stereotype to become one of the most respected trauma surgeons in the Pacific Northwest. But respect didn't equal acceptance. In her decade at Westlake, she'd watched as less qualified colleagues receive promotions she was passed over for. She'd endured the whispers in the doctor's lounge, the subtle exclusion from golf outings where career-advancing connections were made, the patients who requested another doctor upon seeing her face. Dr. Blackwood had been appointed CMO 3 years ago after the previous chief retired. Since then, the hospital's priorities had shifted dramatically. The charitable care fund had been redirected to a new cosmetic surgery wing. The community outreach programs Amara had championed were systematically dismantled. The hospital board, composed primarily of real estate developers and corporate executives, applauded the improved profit margins while ignoring the declining health outcomes in surrounding low-income neighborhoods. Melissa Chin, the night shift administrator with meticulously maintained blonde highlights and a perpetual expression of mild disdain, stood slightly behind Blackwood, her tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. She had been the one to alert Blackwood about last night's incident, her voice dripping with satisfaction as she reported Dr. Wilson's protocol breach. "Dr. Blackwood," Amara said calmly, removing her hospital ID badge, "I took an oath to treat those in need. That man was dying." "That man," Blackwood interrupted, "had no identification, no insurance verification, and no ability to pay for the emergency services you authorized. This hospital isn't a charity." The previous night had begun like any other. Amara was nearing the end of her shift when the ambulance bay doors burst open. 2 paramedics rushed in with a stretcher, the man on it barely conscious, his expensive-looking clothes torn and bloodied. Male, approximately 40 years old, found unconscious in Cascade Park. The paramedic reported multiple lacerations, possible internal bleeding, head trauma, BP dropping, pulse irregular, no ID found. Melissa Chen stepped forward before Amara could respond. "Insurance status?" she demanded, blocking the path to the trauma rooms. "Unknown. No wallet, no phone. the paramedic replied, looking anxiously at the patient whose condition was visibly deteriorating. Then he needs to be transferred to County General, Chen stated flatly, already turning away. We don't have capacity for charity cases tonight. County General was 20 minutes away. The man on the stretcher had minutes, not 20. Move him to Trauma 1, Amara ordered, ignoring Chen's protest. Page Dr. Patel for neurology consult and prep an OR. Now. For the next 6 hours, Amara fought to save the stranger's life. Internal bleeding from a ruptured spleen, 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion. Whatever had happened to him in that park had nearly killed him. Twice during surgery, she brought him back from the brink. When she finally emerged from the OR, exhausted but satisfied, Chen was waiting with a thin smile. Dr. Blackwood has been informed of your unauthorized procedures, she said. He'll deal with you in the morning. Amara had simply nodded and returned to check on her patient, who was now stable in recovery. As she adjusted his IV, she noticed something peculiar, a small tattoo on his wrist, partially hidden by the hospital bracelet. A simple geometric design that seemed vaguely familiar, though she couldn't place it. Now, in the harsh fluorescent light of the emergency department, Amara handed over her badge and hospital tablet to the waiting security guard. Her colleagues watched in uncomfortable silence, most averting their eyes. Only Dr. Drake Patel, who had assisted with the neurology assessment, and Nurse Rodriguez, who had been with her in the OR, looked directly at her with expressions of dismay and solidarity. You'll be hearing from the hospital's legal department regarding the unauthorized expenses, Blackwood continued, clearly enjoying the spectacle he was creating. We may seek restitution. Amara removed her white coat slowly, deliberately. I'd like to check on my patient before I leave. He is no longer your patient, Blackwood snapped. In fact, once he's stable enough to transfer, he'll be sent to county where he belongs. We need the bed for paying customers. Customers, not patients. The word choice said everything about how Blackwood viewed healthcare. As security escorted her through the hospital corridors, past the rooms of patients she had treated for years, past the nurses' station where she had spent countless nights reviewing cases, Amara held her head high. But inside, a storm was brewing. 10 years of her life dedicated to this hospital, to healing, to serving her community, ended in public disgrace because she refused to let a man die over paperwork. Outside, the Seattle rain fell in sheets, soaking through her scrubs as she walked to her car. Her phone buzzed with text messages from Dr. Patel and Nurse Rodriguez, expressing outrage and offering support. But what good were supportive texts when her career might be over, when the hospital could potentially sue her, when the medical board might review her license? As she drove away from Westlake Memorial for what might be the last time, Amara noticed something odd. A sleek black car with tinted windows was parked across from the hospital entrance. A man in an expensive suit stood beside it, speaking urgently into a phone while looking directly at the hospital doors. For a brief moment, their eyes met through the rain-streaked windshield, and Amara felt a strange certainty that he was watching for her. What she couldn't know was that at that very moment, as she drove home to her modest apartment in a diverse neighborhood that most of her colleagues avoided, an extraordinary mobilization was already underway. The man she had saved, the indigent patient Blackwood was so eager to transfer, was wearing a custom-designed neural interface wristband worth $2.3 million, disguised to look like a simple bracelet. And the geometric tattoo she had noticed was not a tattoo at all, but a subdermal biotech implant that only 5 people in the world possessed. Amara's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse in the Rainier Valley district. The building had character-exposed brick, large windows but little luxury. It was all she could afford after paying off her medical school loans and sending money to her parents each month. She had just changed out of her wet scrubs when her phone rang with an unknown number. Thinking it might be the hospital's legal department already, she answered cautiously. "Dr. Wilson? This is Eliza Montgomery, Chief Counsel for Nexus Technologies." The woman's voice was crisp, professional. "We need to speak with you regarding an urgent matter. It concerns a patient you treated last night." Nexus Technologies. The name triggered a memory of the geometric logo she'd seen on the man's wrist. Nexus was one of the world's leading biotech companies, pioneering neural interface technology. Their CEO was the patient you saved. Eliza continued, is Alexander Chen, founder and CEO of Nexus Technologies. He was testing a prototype when he suffered a medical emergency in the park near your hospital. Amara sank onto her couch, stunned. Alexander Chen was a legend in the tech world, brilliant neuroscientist turned entrepreneur whose innovations in brain-computer interfaces were revolutionizing treatment for paralysis and neurological disorders. His company was valued at over $300 billion. Mr. Chen has been moved to a private medical facility, Eliza explained. He's expected to make a full recovery, thanks entirely to your intervention. He's requested a meeting with you. A meeting? Amara repeated, still processing the revelation. Yes. He's quite insistent. A car can pick you up in 30 minutes. Meanwhile, across town in a luxurious private medical suite with panoramic views of Puget Sound, Alexander Chen was reviewing security footage from Westlake Memorial on a tablet, despite his doctor's protests that he needed rest. His angular face, now bruised but still striking, hardened as he watched Dr. Powder. Wilson's public termination. "Get me everything on Lawrence Blackwood," he instructed his assistant. "Financial records, performance reviews, patient outcomes, discrimination complaints, everything." "Already compiling, sir," the assistant replied. "And the hospital board members?" "Them too. I want to know who's been making policy at Westlake for the past 5 years." Chen's fingers moved across the tablet, accessing systems most people didn't know existed. "And contact our friends at the State Medical Board. I think they'll be very interested in some of Westlake's practices." Amara was escorted to a sleek glass building overlooking Lake Washington. Security protocols were extensive biometric scans, NDA signing, a brief but thorough security screening. Finally, she was shown into a comfortable meeting room where Eliza Montgomery waited with a team of serious-looking executives. "Dr. Wilson, thank you for coming," Eliza began. "Mr. Chen is resting, but he's asked us to begin discussions with you immediately." "Discussions about what exactly?" Amara asked, still wary. "About justice," said a new voice. A tall black woman in her 50s entered the room, her presence commanding immediate respect. "I'm Dr. Vanessa Carter, Chief Medical Officer of the Nexus Health Initiative." Amara recognized the name immediately. Dr. Carter was a pioneer in medical ethics and healthcare equity, known for her groundbreaking work in underserved communities. "What happened to you at Westlake is unfortunately not an isolated incident," Dr. Carter continued, taking a seat across from Amara. "We've been monitoring discriminatory practices in major hospitals across the country. Westlake has been on our radar for some time." Over the next hour, they showed Amara evidence that left her speechless. Internal emails between Blackwood and hospital board members discussing patient profitability metrics that clearly targeted low-income neighborhoods. Statistics showing that since Blackwood's appointment, treatment denials had increased 340% for patients of color. Financial records revealing that the budget cuts to community programs had actually been redirected to bonuses for executives. "We've been building a case," Eliza explained. But we needed someone on the inside, someone with credibility who could testify to these practices firsthand. And now you have me, Amara said slowly, understanding dawning. Because they fired me in front of witnesses after I saved your CEO. Precisely. Dr. Carter nodded. Though Alexander's accident wasn't planned, his encounter with you has provided the perfect catalyst for action. Meanwhile, at Westlake Memorial, Blackwood was holding an emergency staff meeting, unaware that 3 employees in the room were quietly documenting everything on devices provided by Nexus Technologies. Let this be a lesson, Blackwood announced to the assembled medical staff. Protocol exists for a reason. Financial viability is what keeps this hospital operating. Dr. Wilson forgot that medicine is ultimately a business. Dr. Patel, normally reserved, raised his hand. With all due respect, sir, Dr. Wilson saved that patient's life. Isn't that our primary obligation as physicians? Blackwood's smile was cold. Our primary obligation is to the institution, Dr. Patel. If you find that problematic, perhaps Westlake isn't the right fit for you either. The threat hung in the air, silencing any further dissent. But in the back row, Nurse Rodriguez was already sending a recording of the exchange to a secure server where it joined hundreds of other documented incidents. Across town, in a luxury penthouse that served as Nexus Technologies' Seattle outpost, Alexander Chen was meeting with a team of investigators despite his doctor's orders to rest. "Show me the pattern," he instructed, his voice still weak but his eyes sharp. On a large screen, data visualization software displayed a damning picture. A network of hospitals across the country, all showing similar patterns of discrimination. All connected through a complex web of investors and board members to a single entity, Helix Healthcare Management, a private equity firm specializing in hospital acquisitions. Westlake is just one node in a much larger system, explained the lead investigator. Helix buys hospitals, installs administrators like Blackwood, cuts services to vulnerable populations, inflates prices, and extracts profit. They've done it in 17 cities so far. Chen's expression darkened. And the human cost? Estimated 300 excess deaths annually in affected communities, primarily people of color and those below the poverty line. Chen turned to his assistant. Schedule the press conference for next week, and make sure Dr. Wilson is prepared for what's coming. 3 days after her termination, Amara sat in her apartment reviewing the evidence Nexus had compiled. Her phone had been ringing constantly, colleagues expressing support, journalists seeking comments, even a few job offers from competing hospitals trying to capitalize on Westlake's PR disaster. The story of her firing had leaked to social media, though no one yet knew the identity of the patient she had saved. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Nurse Rodriguez standing there, looking nervous. "I shouldn't be here," Rodriguez said quickly, "but I thought you should know. They're transferring your patient, Mr. Cento County, tonight. Blackwood is rushing it through, claiming the bed is needed for a VIP patient. But the real reason," she lowered her voice, "the real reason is that a lawyer from Nexus Technologies came asking questions today." Blackwood panicked. Amara's mind raced. Chen was still recovering from major surgery. A transfer now, especially to an overcrowded facility like County, could be dangerous. "There's more," Rodriguez continued. "I overheard Blackwood on the phone with someone from the medical board. He's filing a complaint against your license, claiming you endangered a patient by performing unnecessary procedures." This was the final straw. Amara had been willing to fight for her job, her reputation, but now Blackwood was potentially endangering Chen's life and actively working to destroy her career completely. "Thank you for telling me," Amara said, making a decision. "I need to make a call." After Rodriguez left, Amara contacted Eliza Montgomery. Blackwood is transferring Chen tonight. We need to move now. Understood, Eliza replied without hesitation. Alexander anticipated this. The plan is already in motion. Are you ready to go public? Amara took a deep breath. Yes, it's time. That evening, as hospital staff prepared for the controversial transfer, Blackwood received an unexpected call from the chairman of the hospital board. Lawrence, what the hell is going on? The chairman demanded. I just got a call from the governor's office. There's going to be a surprise inspection of Westlake tomorrow morning. Something about patient care violations. Blackwood paled. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. Probably related to that Wilson situation. But we're on solid legal ground there. You better be right, the chairman warned, because the governor specifically mentioned your name. As Blackwood hung up, his assistant rushed in. Sir, there's a problem. The patient Dr. Wilson treated, we can't find any record of him in the system. It's like his files have been erased. Blackwood's confidence began to crumble. That's impossible. Check again. But the digital trail had indeed vanished, expertly removed by Nexus Technologies' cybersecurity team. The only evidence of Chen's treatment was now in Amara's detailed notes, safely backed up on Nexus servers. The annual Seattle Medical Excellence Gala was the most prestigious healthcare event in the Pacific Northwest. Held in the grand ballroom of the Olympic Hotel, it brought together hospital administrators, wealthy donors, pharmaceutical executives, and political figures in a lavish display of networking and self-congratulation. Lawrence Blackwood arrived in high spirits despite the stress of the past few days. He had successfully transferred the mysterious patient to county, filed the complaint against Dr. Wilson, and prepared a statement for tomorrow's inspection that placed all blame on rogue staff members acting against hospital policy. Tonight was his moment to shine. He was receiving the Administrator of the Year award for Placed for Moment. Westlake's remarkable financial turnaround. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and expensive evening wear. Blackwood moved confidently through the crowd, accepting congratulations and exchanging pleasantries with board members and potential donors. On a large screen behind the stage, a promotional video highlighted Westlake's commitment to excellence with carefully selected patient testimonials and impressive statistics. And now, announced the MC, please welcome to the stage the chairman of the Washington State Medical Association, Dr. James Harrington, for a special presentation. Blackwood straightened his bow tie, preparing to be called up for his award. But Dr. Harrington's opening remarks took an unexpected turn. Tonight, we had planned to present the Administrator of the Year award. He began, his expression grave. However, in light of disturbing information that has just come to our attention, that presentation has been canceled. A murmur ran through the crowd. Blackwood froze mid-sip of his champagne. Instead, Harrington continued, I've been asked to introduce someone whose story demands our immediate attention. Please welcome Dr. Amara Wilson. The crowd gasped as Amara walked onto the stage. Elegant in a simple black dress, her head held high. Blackwood nearly dropped his glass. 3 days ago, Amara began, her voice steady, I was publicly fired from Westlake Memorial Hospital for saving a man's life. My crime was treating a patient who had no identification and no proof of insurance, a patient who was dying before my eyes. The room had gone completely silent. What I didn't know then, she continued, was that the man I saved was Alexander Chen, CEO of Nexus Technologies. The screen behind her changed to show Alexander Chen himself, still bearing the marks of his injuries but unmistakable to everyone in the room. Blackwood's face drained of color. But the identity of my patient shouldn't matter, Amara continued. Every life deserves the same care, the same commitment. Unfortunately, under the leadership of Dr. Portport, Lawrence Blackwood, and Helix Healthcare Management, Westlake Memorial has systematically denied care to thousands based on their race, zip code, and economic status. The screen changed again, now displaying internal emails, statistical analyses, and financial records. Gasps and murmurs spread through the audience as the evidence mounted. "This isn't just about one hospital or one administrator," Amara explained. "It's about a deliberate strategy being implemented across the country, placing profit above human life." From the back of the ballroom, a new voice joined the conversation. "And it ends tonight." Alexander Chen walked slowly toward the stage, still moving carefully due to his injuries. The crowd parted before him, stunned whispers following in his wake. 3 nights ago, I experienced what thousands of Americans face every day, the terror of being denied medical care when my life hung in the balance," Chen said, joining Amara on stage. "The only difference is that I had the resources to fight back." Blackwood, seeing his career and freedom crumbling before his eyes, made a desperate move. "This is slander," he shouted, pushing toward the stage. "You have no proof of any wrongdoing." "Actually," came yet another voice, "we have extensive proof." Dr. Vanessa Carter stepped forward, accompanied by 2 federal agents. Lawrence Blackwood, as part of an ongoing investigation by the Department of Health and Human Services. "We have documented over 300 cases of patient discrimination, insurance fraud, and medical negligence under your administration." One of the agents moved toward Blackwood. "Sir, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of healthcare fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations." As Blackwood was led away in handcuffs, the screen changed again to show Melissa Chen and several hospital board members also being taken into custody at their homes and offices. "This is just the beginning," Chen announced to the stunned audience. "Today, Nexus Technologies is launching the Healthcare Equity Initiative, a $2 billion program to identify and prosecute discriminatory practices in medical institutions nationwide." The gala erupted in chaos. Journalists rushed to file stories, hospital administrators frantically checked their phones, politicians distanced themselves from those being arrested. In the midst of it all, Amara stood tall, finally vindicated. The fallout was swift and comprehensive. By morning, the story had exploded across national news. "Tech billionaire denied care. Exposes massive healthcare discrimination scheme," read the headlines. Social media erupted with "Justice for Dr. Wilson" trending worldwide. Blackwood spent the night in federal custody, denied the bail his attorneys requested due to flight risk concerns. As he sat in his cell, the empire he had built began to crumble spectacularly. The hospital board, desperate to save themselves, voted unanimously to terminate his contract and cooperate fully with investigators. Melissa Chen, facing her own charges, quickly turned state's evidence, providing detailed accounts of how Blackwood had instructed staff to redirect certain patients based on demographic profiles and insurance status. Her testimony revealed a point system Blackwood had implemented, rewarding staff who successfully turned away unprofitable patients with bonuses and preferred schedules. The State Medical Board emergency session was broadcast live, an unprecedented move that signaled the gravity of the situation. They voted unanimously to suspend Blackwood's medical license pending the outcome of criminal proceedings. More significantly, they announced a comprehensive review of all hospitals associated with Helix Healthcare Management. At the Department of Justice, prosecutors announced the expansion of their investigation to include Helix's executive team and major investors. "This appears to be one of the most extensive healthcare fraud schemes we've encountered," the Attorney General stated in a press conference. "The systematic denial of care based on race and economic status violates multiple federal laws." Helix's stock plummeted 68% in a single day. Investors fled, board members resigned, and partner hospitals rushed to distance themselves from the toxic brand. Class action lawsuits were filed on behalf of patients who had been denied care, with early estimates suggesting potential damages exceeding $3 billion. For Blackwood personally, the destruction was complete. His wife filed for divorce by the end of the week. His children issued public statements expressing shock and condemning his actions. His mansion was picketed by former patients sharing stories of mistreatment and discrimination. The country club where he had spent weekends networking with other executives revoked his membership. But perhaps the most devastating blow came when journalists uncovered that Blackwood's own mother had been denied care at a Helix-managed hospital in Arizona 2 years earlier, deemed not a priority patient due to her Medicare status. She had died waiting for treatment that never came a victim of the very system her son had helped create. 6 months later, Amara stood in the atrium of what had once been Westlake Memorial Hospital. The space had been completely transformed, gone were the intimidating security desks and confusing signage that had once deterred undesirable patients. In their place was an open, welcoming environment with multilingual greeters and clear directions. A new sign hung above the entrance. Chen Wilson Community Health Center, Care Without Barriers. Alexander Chen approached, walking normally now, his injuries fully healed. "What do you think of the changes?" he asked, gesturing to the bustling medical center around them. "It's almost unrecognizable," Amara admitted, "in the best possible way." The transformation went far beyond aesthetics. Under the joint leadership of Amara as medical director and Chen's financial backing, the former Westlake Memorial had been reborn with a revolutionary approach to healthcare delivery. The new center operated on a sliding-scale payment system, ensuring no one was turned away for inability to pay. Multilingual staff reflected the diversity of the surrounding communities. Outreach programs brought preventive care directly to neighborhoods with historically low access to medical services. Most revolutionary was the transparent pricing model that eliminated the Byzantine billing practices that had once been used to discriminate against certain patients. "The patient satisfaction scores came in," Chen informed her, showing her a tablet with the data. 98% approval rating. And more importantly, health outcomes in the surrounding communities have already shown statistically significant improvement. Similar transformations were underway at 17 other hospitals formerly managed by Helix, now part of the Nexus Health Network. Each facility had been paired with a local physician leader like Amara doctors who had previously been marginalized or pushed out for prioritizing patient care over profit. The Chen Wilson model was already being studied by medical schools nationwide. 3 state legislatures had introduced bills requiring hospitals to adopt similar transparency and anti-discrimination measures. The American Medical Association had established a task force specifically focused on eliminating racial and economic disparities in healthcare delivery. The governor's office called, Chen mentioned as they toured the new pediatric wing. "They want you to chair the state's Healthcare Equity Commission." Amara smiled. "I'll consider it, but my priority is making sure this place works the way it should." They passed the emergency department where Amara had once been publicly fired. Now it was staffed by a diverse team of physicians and nurses, many of whom had left other hospitals specifically to work under her leadership. "Dr. Wilson," called out Nurse Rodriguez, now the ED nursing director, "the community health fair has already registered over 500 participants for Saturday." "Excellent," Amara replied. "Make sure we have enough screening stations set up." As they continued their tour, Chen received a notification on his phone. "The verdict is in," he said quietly. They paused, watching the news alert together. Lawrence Blackwood had been found guilty on all counts: healthcare fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations, and in a final ironic twist, involuntary manslaughter related to patients who had died after being denied care under his policies. The judge had sentenced him to 22 years in federal prison. "Justice," Amara said simply. In a federal correctional facility 200 miles away, Lawrence Blackwood was experiencing a very different reality. Once accustomed to tailored suits and executive privileges, he now wore a standard-issue jumpsuit and shared a small cell with another inmate. His requests for special treatment had been denied. His appeals had failed. His assets had been frozen to pay restitution to victims. Most ironically, the prison's medical facility was chronically understaffed and underfunded, meaning that Blackwood's complaints of chest pain and difficulty sleeping were met with the same indifference he had once shown to unprofitable patients. "You'll be seen when resources are available," the prison nurse informed him, using almost exactly the language Blackwood had instructed his staff to use at Westlake. Melissa Chen had avoided prison through her cooperation but was now working as a cashier at a suburban pharmacy. Her career in healthcare administration permanently ended by her role in the scandal. Every time she saw Dr. Wilson on television receiving another award or recognition, she quickly changed the channel. Meanwhile, Dr. Patel, who had stood up to Blackwood at that fateful staff meeting, was now Amara's chief of neurology, leading a department that was pioneering affordable treatments for neurological conditions using adapted versions of Nexus Technologies' neural interfaces. The hospital board members who had enabled Blackwood's policies had all resigned in disgrace. Several faced their own legal challenges. The chairman, once a fixture in Seattle's elite social circles, had been forced to sell his vacation homes and luxury cars to pay legal fees and civil penalties. In perhaps the most satisfying reversal, the VIP suite that had once been reserved for wealthy patients regardless of medical need had been converted into a community education center where local residents received free health literacy training and preventive care education. 1 year to the day after Amara's public firing, she stood on a different stage, this time at the National Medical Ethics Conference in Washington, D.C. The audience of thousands included physicians, lawmakers, patient advocates, and medical students from across the country. The Chen-Wilson model isn't just about one hospital or one community, she explained to the rapt audience. It's about fundamentally reimagining the relationship between healthcare providers and the communities they serve. On screens throughout the hall, data visualizations showed the impact of their work. A 43% reduction in preventable deaths in the communities served by reformed hospitals, a 67% increase in preventive care utilization among previously underserved populations, a 28% decrease in emergency room visits due to conditions that could have been treated earlier. But statistics don't tell the whole story, Amara continued. The real measure of our success is in the individual lives changed. The screen behind her showed Maria Gonzalez, a 62-year-old grandmother who had been turned away from Westlake 3 times under Blackwood's administration. Now, thanks to early intervention at the Chen-Wilson Center, her diabetes was under control for the first time in decades. It showed Jamal Washington, a 7-year-old whose asthma had been dismissed as not severe enough for intervention by Melissa Chen. Now, with proper treatment, he was playing soccer and had not had an emergency room visit in 8 months. It showed dozens of other patients whose lives had been improved or saved by the new approach to care patients who would have been deemed unprofitable under the old system. The lesson here isn't just about exposing corruption or punishing wrongdoing, Amara concluded. It's about creating systems that make discrimination and profit-driven care impossible by design. It's about building institutions that reflect our highest values as healers, not our worst instincts as businesses. As she finished speaking, the audience rose in a standing ovation that lasted nearly 5 minutes. Among those applauding most enthusiastically were medical students wearing pins that read Wilson Fellows, recipients of a new scholarship program Chen had established for students from underrepresented backgrounds committed to serving vulnerable communities. After the conference, Amara found Alexander Chen waiting in the green room. "The Senate committee wants to meet with us tomorrow," he informed her. "They're serious about using our model as the framework for national healthcare reform." Amara nodded, still processing how far they had come in just 1 year. From fired to federal policy in 12 months, she mused. Not bad. "You know what I find most ironic," Chen said, as they walked toward the exit. "If Blackwood hadn't fired you so publicly, if he had just quietly pushed you out or buried you in paperwork, none of this would have happened." His own arrogance and prejudice created the conditions for his downfall. Outside the convention center, a group of young doctors waited, hoping for a chance to speak with Amara. Many held copies of her recently published book, Healing the System, Medicine Beyond Profit, which had become required reading in medical ethics courses nationwide. "Dr. Wilson," called one young woman, her eyes shining with admiration, "your work inspired me to switch from corporate law to medical school. I want to be part of this revolution." Amara smiled, taking time to speak with each person despite her exhaustion. This was the true victory, not Blackwood's imprisonment or her own vindication, but the new generation of healthcare providers committed to a different vision of medicine. Later that evening, in her hotel room, Amara received a video call from her parents. They were sitting in the community room of the retirement village where they now lived, a comfortable facility paid for by Amara's new position and book royalties. "We saw you on television, my star," her father said proudly. The whole village gathered to watch. "Your mother cried through the whole speech," he added, earning a gentle swat from his wife. "I cried because I remember how many doors were closed to you," her mother explained. "How many times you came home exhausted from fighting the same battles day after day, and now, look, you're changing the whole system." Amara felt tears forming in her own eyes. "I just did what was right," she said simply. "And that," her father replied, "is why you've accomplished what no one else could. Because when the moment came to choose between what was right and what was safe, you chose right without hesitation." As she ended the call, Amara walked to the window of her hotel room, looking out at the capital city spread before her. Somewhere in those government buildings, legislation was being drafted based on her work. In hospitals across the country, administrators were re-examining their policies, fearful of becoming the next Westlake. In medical schools, students were studying the Chen-Wilson model as the future of healthcare delivery. All because she had refused to let a man die, regardless of who he was or what he could pay. The universe, it seemed, had a poetic sense of justice after all. What had begun as her greatest professional humiliation had transformed into her greatest opportunity to heal not just individual patients, but the broken system itself. And that was a diagnosis even Lawrence Blackwood, in his prison cell, could no longer deny. The story of Dr. Amara Wilson reveals profound truths about courage, justice, and the power of principled action in the face of systemic corruption. When Amara chose to save Alexander Chen's life despite hospital protocol demanding she turn him away, she demonstrated that true integrity means honoring one's deepest values, even when doing so carries significant personal risk. Her decision wasn't made knowing she was treating a powerful tech billionaire. It was made because she recognized the inherent worth of a human life regardless of status or ability to pay. Discrimination often hides behind seemingly neutral policies and professional jargon. Blackwood's patient profitability metrics and resource allocation guidelines were sanitized language masking systematic prejudice against vulnerable populations. These systems persist not just through the actions of obvious villains like Blackwood, but through the silent compliance of those who recognize the injustice but choose comfort over confrontation. The transformation began only when people like Dr. Patel, Nurse Rodriguez, and ultimately Amara herself refused to remain complicit in a system that violated their moral principles. Power, when concentrated and unchecked, inevitably corrupts. Blackwood's authority at Westlake allowed his prejudices and greed to shape institutional policy without meaningful oversight. His public humiliation of Amara demonstrated his belief that he was untouchably, a belief reinforced by a hospital board more concerned with profit margins than patient outcomes. This unchallenged authority created a culture where discrimination was not just tolerated but incentivized, with staff like Melissa Chen rewarded for turning away unprofitable patients. The story also illuminates how privilege can either blind us to injustice or equip us to fight it. Alexander Chen's experience as a patient denied care created a rare moment where someone with extraordinary resources directly experienced the injustice typically reserved for marginalized communities. This perspective shift enabled him to recognize a systemic problem that might otherwise have continued unchallenged. His decision to use his power and wealth to address this injustice rather than simply seeking personal revenge demonstrates how privilege can become a tool for positive change when coupled with moral clarity. True excellence in healthcare, and indeed in any profession, cannot be measured solely by financial metrics. The contrast between Blackwood's profit-driven excellence and Amara's compassion-centered care demonstrates that genuine medical excellence emerges from treating patients with dignity and providing universal access. The Chen Wilson Center's superior health outcomes prove that compassionate care isn't just morally right, but practically effective, challenging the false dichotomy between ethical practice and operational success. The transformation of Westlake into the Chen Wilson Center teaches us that effective change requires both moral vision and strategic implementation. Amara's stand was necessary but insufficient. Lasting change required Chen's resources, Dr. Carter's expertise, and a comprehensive strategy addressing everything from payment systems to community outreach. The most enduring reforms come when ethical imperatives are translated into practical, sustainable structures that make discrimination difficult by design. Perhaps most poetically, Blackwood's downfall came not from external forces, but from the very system of discrimination he created. His public humiliation of Amara created the visibility that ultimately exposed his corrupt practices. His emphasis on documentation to justify denying care created the paper trail that prosecutors used to convict him. Even his prison experience, being told to wait for medical attention with the same dismissive language he taught his staff to use, demonstrates how our actions often create the conditions for our own consequences. What began as one doctor's decision to treat one patient cascaded into national healthcare reform, illustrating how individual ethical choices, while seemingly small in the moment, can catalyze far-reaching change. Amara's stand created a moment of moral clarity that mobilized others to reconsider their own roles in perpetuating or challenging unjust systems. From Dr. Fru, Thomas's aus in Palmester Broad on Thomas's Alsi, Thomas's en Thomasels. Ventilize on just foral, Ventilises L, Gentiliset mode, Versasivend, Proteot. Patel finding his voice to medical students wearing Wilson Fellows pins, her example inspired a new generation committed to medicine centered on human dignity rather than profit. Amara's journey from dedicated physician to national healthcare leader demonstrates that authentic leadership emerges not from pursuing power, but from consistent service to others and unwavering commitment to principles. Her moral authority came not from her title, but from her actionable willingness to risk everything to uphold her oath as a healer. This contrasts sharply with Blackwood's leadership, which was based on hierarchical authority and intimidation rather than moral example. The story ultimately reminds us that justice doesn't simply arrive through the passage of time or inevitable progress. The arc of justice bends through the deliberate actions of individuals and communities who recognize injustice and work strategically to address it. Amara's vindication came not through passive waiting, but through active collaboration with allies who shared her vision and were positioned to help implement it. In the end, what appeared to be Amara's greatest professional humiliation became her greatest opportunity to heal not just individual patients, but the broken healthcare system itself. By refusing to compromise her principles, even when doing so cost her dearly, she set in motion events that transformed not just one hospital, but healthcare delivery nationwide. Her story teaches us that moral courage, doing what is right regardless of personal consequences, may initially appear to lead to defeat, but often becomes the catalyst for victories far greater than we could imagine. Sometimes being fired for doing the right thing is simply the universe preparing us for something infinitely more important than the position we lost.